What if I said to you there was a major impact that occurred during the ceremony?
Yes, well, Father Frank was a punter, and he heard me and the boys talk, and he goes, "Oh, have you got one in today?" And I said, "Yeah, it's major impact." He said, "Well, could someone have 50 on for me?" So one of the boys got the 50, and he was marrying Beck and I, and halfway through it, someone went, "Yes!" And he went, "Did that horse win?"
G'day punters and welcome to Quinny's Stablemates. Our very special guest today, a man that dominates the racetrack, but more importantly, one of the great characters of our sport. A warm welcome to Lindsey Smith.
How are you, Quinny, all right?
I'm better for seeing you, Linz, and I can't wait to go down memory lane today. We'll talk about your journey and some of the superstar horses you've trained along the way, and hopefully you can share with us an entertaining tale or two.
No worries at all, I'll do my best.
We'll open the batting by talking about the early days. Tell us about a young Lindsey.
Well, I went to school in East Fremantle, a school called John Curtin, and I was there for about halfway year through the first year, and across the road there was a couple of trotters, and strangely the smell of the horses and the manure lured me into that, and hence I used to hang over the fence and look at the horses while most of my mates were chasing the two-legged girls. I was looking at the four-legged ones.
So what was your first job in the industry?
I used to go down after school on the weekends, just picking up the yards when I was 12, which led me to being an apprentice jockey. Them days you could sort of leave school. I wasn't very good at school and wasn't an interest of mine. So I stayed at a place called in Rockingham, Colin France, who was a leading trainer at the time. And he looked after me. Them days you could stay with the trainer. They looked after you like their parents. And you got a massive amount of money. I think them days I got $4.
So how did you make the $4 last the week?
Well, I was in the middle of nowhere, so I couldn't go too far. So there were two $2 notes, which were green. So I saved a few of them up over my time because I couldn't spend them, and still to this day I'm not really a big spender.
You're still very astute with your money sometimes. That might have varied along the way when it comes to the punt, but we'll get to those stories as well. Now, I dare say track work back then would have been very, very different to what it's like for young track work riders these days.
Oh yeah, my job was to just go out to the bush and follow the fence line, and basically the trees were the markers. You'd go out for about 40 minutes. And generally by the time you turned around and come home, most of the horses were charging home, so you had to learn to get strong pretty quick. They did have apprentice school back in them days, but as I said, I lived too far away from the city, so I was basically self-taught, and just got my licence at an early age, 14. I had a couple of trials, and then they said I was good enough to go straight in the race. And it was a field that I wasn't really good at, to be honest. And what still amazes me today, you hear all the cheering and the yelling in the grandstand when you're watching the race, but when you're actually riding the race down the back straight, when you're in front, the silence is amazing. So that's never left me, how quiet it is down the back. All you can generally hear is a couple of jockeys screaming a little bit, but amazing, that feeling has never left me.
And when did you pivot from thinking, I'm not going to be a jockey, I'm probably going to go down a different career path, and that's that of being a trainer?
The weight started to hurt me, and I had diuretic pills. They're barred now, but I had them, and one day I went to the toilet and fainted, so I said, this isn't really my go. So my brother at the time was working for Tommy Hughes in Victoria, and he came over with a horse for the Perth Cup called Valadero, and they needed workers, so he took me back with him. Hence I started to work for Tommy Hughes for a number of years.
How was that transition from sunny Perth to sometimes less than balmy Melbourne?
No, pretty cold. I didn't adapt that well to it, but they were such a different scene because the horse were in the boxes, and so well looked after, where in Western Australia there was me and another apprentice who used to do 20 horses at Tommy Hughes. He had 3 horses just to look after. So, and started to learn about even time properly from 1,000 metres and home 600, as I said earlier, at Western Australia, tree to tree, or just gallop down the beach flat out. So I had to learn a little bit, and at the time I'd never gambled on horses, but it was quite a big punting stable.
Tell us some of the stories that you remember from the time with Tommy, and probably how a lot of the staff got a little bit of extra income along the way.
Yeah, well, Tommy took me to Hamilton, and he said on the drive there, because he'd always go, he'd talk like that, and he'd go, Lindsey, you having your first bet today? I said, he said, how much do I pay you? And I remember it was $110. He goes, well, you keep the 10, and we're having 100 on a horse called Running Right at Hamilton. And it got beat a nose. He said, bad luck, at least you still got the 10, but, I had to survive the week with the $10, which honed in my survival skills. And but the next time, we went to the races, it was at Caulfield. He had a horse called Nioki, Ace Attack, and Money Talks. And he took my wages, and I think in return, he gave me like 22,000. They all won.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't a good thing. Don't trust me. Look, winning wasn't good, because it started me on a way where I thought it was easy, but I soon found out that was incorrect.
So you're earning $110 a week and 22,000 jumps in, and I'm guessing you were early 20s at this stage?
Yes, yeah. It was just I wasn't even. I would have just been 20, yeah.
So 20 years old. What did you do with the money? Did you do anything smart? Did you buy a car or something like that?
No, I proceeded to knock it off and just bet higher, bigger, didn't have any respect for the money, and then it's still years later would have been another 15 years before I actually started to respect the money anyway. But a lot more happened after that. That was only the start of the money just coming and going.
That was the tip of the iceberg. So while you were with Tommy, were there more stories like that?
Oh, well, he gave me Salamander in 1979 to strap in the Melbourne Cup, and we thought, I thought he won, only because them days you had this. The stand I was sitting in was about the 50-metre mark, and Clem Dimsey was the caller then, Channel 10, and he called him the winner. So I got quite excited, but Hyperne beat us. But Tommy was a wonderful boss. Taught me a lot, and his gambling was his main focus, which I think he would have been a greater trainer if he just focused on winning every time he went around. That'd be my opinion of Tommy.
So it was all about setting horses up to back them, as opposed to just having each horse at their premium each time you take them to the track.
Yes, that was his model. He got a kick out of that. He always looked after the staff well, but there was times when you were travelling a little bit dusty. So, but when he did have money, you all had money, and he lived his life all the way along like that.
The good times were great. The bad times were very bad.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the droughts are generally quite long.
So you would have learnt so much under his tutelage, though. A terrific trainer, and obviously placed his horses so well, especially when the money was on. What was the next chapter for you going back to Perth?
I got a job. Become friends with Michael Fraser, who finished up being a form expert on one of the channels, and he worked for Henry Davis and Mark Reed. They were looking for a foreman, and they offered me the job, and so I went there, and he worked his horses completely different. Henry, he was very hard. In them days, he'd sort of work them twice a day. He'd swim them for 10 minutes round and round the swimming pool. Or them days you could swim in the Maribyrnong River behind the boat, and he'd swim them one bridge to the other. So he did really work the horses. And, later in my life, I sort of took a lot of what he taught me on board, and I realised what he was trying to do. But the attrition rate on the tracks, he couldn't get to his end goal, and a lot of them would go sore or break down. But wonderful trainer, and Scallywag, he was quite the same. And obviously Mark Reed was a big bookmaker, a big punter at the time. So their main mission was to destroy everyone else.
Talk to me about getting closer.
Yeah, well, he trialled a couple of times and down the straight with some nice horses and trialled very good. And one day Henry said to all of us, I was waiting for this horse. His nickname was Brownie. That's how Henry would never tell anyone their names. There was Brownie, Ginger, Gary, Quinny, or whatever. So, but I, being the foreman, knew his name was getting closer. But anyway, they said that the truck was coming to pick him up and take him to the paddock. He thought he'd trained off a little bit, which was to my surprise because he just galloped down the straight with horses like Cold, Chisel, Stolen Song. They were good open-class horses. Anyway, he went off to the paddock. Anyway, I was living with Alan Tripp, the SP bookmaker at the time, and Rick Cummings was his partner, and I think them days they were illegal. But anyway, we were talking, and I said, there's a horse at Henry's, Jesus, good horse, but he put in the paddock, but threw me off. He said, what's its name? I said, Getting Closer. There was nothing intended to be punting or anything like that because we're just chatting. Anyway, about a week later, on a Friday night, Rick Cummins rings me up and goes, that horse Getting Closer, it's in Sydney. I said, no, I went to the paddock, go on the Romsey. He says, I'm telling you, have a look at the best bets. So I had a look at the best bets, and there he was. So I did feel a bit jilted a bit. Anyway, so I said to Rick, well, I thought they'd left me out. So I tried to get as much money as I could together, and I finished up. I had, I think it was 7,000 on Getting Closer with Alan. Anyway, in the morning of the race, I went to work and I didn't say anything to anybody and went home, and Henry's daughter, Kim, who married Greg Hall, rang and said, I want to come and see you. And I thought, I always liked Kim, and I thought, this is the time she's going to put it on me. And she come round, she goes, listen, in about half an hour, because I kept the eye on the clock because it wasn't on TV them days. Brownie's in and Mark's had a bet for you. And I went, oh, well, I've already thought to myself, I'll have a bet myself. Anyway, so the phone rings and it's Alan Tripp, and he said I couldn't get that money on because he had kept taking the bets and he had to take all Mark. So it worked out that I didn't have a bet, but Mark had the 3,000 on for me, and he duly got the money, and I think he paid me, he averaged, I think it was 10 to 1 or a figure like that, and Mark Julie paid me the 3,000 at the 10 to 1.
Very nice indeed. It was as much as 100 to 1 into $4.50, so it's safe to say plenty of people got $1 or $2.
Yes, well, it was one of them days where I think we could have been, struggling with because Mark covered all the costs. He owned all the horses, paid all the wages, so he brunted all the cost of everything. And wonderful man to work for, good bloke to work for. He was very generous, and he gave me a chance at a very young age. And Henry was a different cat. He was a bit strange, but his training methods later in life would steer me in the right direction.
Now, Mark was obviously a very intelligent individual as well. What was he like away from business? Did you see that side of him at all? No,
never. It was he was quite private that way, with the stables. But he was in the office. He had all the guys writing down, watching all the replays, writing it down them days. Yeah. Now it's everything obviously a lot easier, but he was doing all that form guide stuff way, 30, 40 years ago. So he was in front of his time.
Ahead of his time, there's no doubt about that. And it sounds like for the second time in your young life, you've come into a hell of a lot of money, but it doesn't sound like it was second time lucky in terms of investing it wisely.
No, I went to Essendon Toyota and there was a car on a swivel, black car, Toyota Celica that had just come out, and it looked like that movie Knight Rider, where it was dark car, black, all the windows were black, and it was 14,100. I went in there with cash, and I bought the car, and I asked for the keys, but I had to wait a day because we had to get the registration done and all that. But yeah, I took that car home.
And what happened with the car, Lindsay? Because I fear you're not going to look me in the eye and say you're still driving it today.
No. It's unfortunately I discovered another good thing, and I sold the car to have another bet. But unfortunately, that didn't come off, and I finished up walking for a few months till I backed another winner.
Now, Lindsay, at the time, you've got no money, no car, so you do the sensible thing and you go buy a horse, and that horse was Old Cobber.
Yeah, he was. I was friends with Jason Oliver at the time, and didn't have any horses, only the one horse. So he said that we should buy this horse of Bob Peters by Old Spice. So it was Old Cobber. It was 22,000. I didn't have the money to buy him, and but between Jason's uncle and his auntie and his mother and some of my friends from the restaurant field, we scraped up 22,000 and bought him. The first day I took him home and rode him, I tore up their money because the horse had a very bad action, had bad feet, and I was quite disappointed. Come from a very good trainer, so I decided to put him out in the paddock and take all his grain away from him, his protein. He just ate grass, and 6 weeks later I seen him pelting over the paddock, so I brought him in. It was a different horse altogether. He fortunately... he won nine in a row, which led to other things.
Well, he was the horse that really then springboarded your success. As you said, he won 9 in a row, and Bob Peters was so impressed with what you did with that horse that basically he discarded. He gave you a horse that would really help you take the next step in Old Comrade.
Yeah, well, the first 4 he sent me, Bob, they were quite slow, and I sent them home. I said, these aren't much chop, Bob, so take them home, thinking that he wouldn't ring back and give me some more. He rang back a week later and gave me 10, and which out of them 10 was Old Comrade and Old Money, which later went to America. He sold it for $1 million back in the early 2000s. So she raced in America, but it was because of Old Cobber that led me, who Bob used to own, led me to a situation where I was able to train for a great owner.
Now, Old Comrade, his most famous victory was the 2002 Australian Cup when he beat another superstar Western Australian in Northerly.
Yeah, well, he just come off winning the Railway Stakes in the Kingston Town in Perth, both Group 1s. I give him a spell, and I spoiled him a little bit, and I took him over for the first run. I think it was the All, over 1,400. Went terrible. He was fat, undertrained. And Paul Harvey said that he wasn't going to stick around, he'd go home. So I was able to get Peter Mertens to ride him, and he ran, a week later, he ran in the Oakley Plate, run 4th, come from last. His last 600 was 32 and a bit. So Peter came in and said, this is one super good horse. So a week later, we butted him up again in the St. George. And Nordley was in that. He was third on the fence. He didn't look like getting a run. And Peter took off and hit the front. And as Ollie generally does, he got the rails run and got through and nabbed me. But then Paul Harvey rang and said he'd like to get the back on the horse, which has annoyed me a little bit. But anyway, instead of cutting my nose off, I put Paul back on, and we rode that horse to beat Nordley. And it is one of the times that everything, the perfect plan.
And you went then from being well-known in Western Australia and well-known in Victoria to well-known across the country, because that was the horse that really put you up on lights.
Yeah, well, he was a great horse. He only had one more start. That was in the Doncaster, and he bowed his tendon. But it did lead me into, a situation that I was better known in Victoria than I was in my home state.
And not long after that horse, another star horse had joined your stable. He was known as Plastered. Talk to us about the horse that I think a lot of people still remember fondly today with a big smile.
Yeah, well, he's still at home now in Western Australia. I still have my property in Western Australia, and he still lives there. As I've said before, he'll always live there because he owns it. He paid for it, so I'm renting it off him. So without him, we wouldn't have that property. And it's a situation that most horse trainers only finish up with money when they sell their land, and the suburbia is getting close to my place in Perth, so he would have well and truly done his job in the next couple of years, I think, Plastered, because it's going to be my family's wealth, and it was a very nice horse for me, and he's one of the regrets I have with him that I never started him in the Melbourne Cup after he won the Derby.
Well, 2004 Cox Plate Day. Savabeel wins the Cox Plate as a 3-year-old, and you win the Amy Vars. And on the back of that, it sets up a mouth-watering clash in the Derby. A genuine stain type in Plastered versus the brilliant Savabeel. What was it like going to that battle?
Yeah, well, I was quite confident because I think everyone was saying that our Amy Vars was running quite a fair bit quicker than Savabeel. I knew my horse was quite fit, and when they came into the mountain yard, I seen Savabeel, and I thought he was a bit on the soft side. So we thought that we'll make it a hard 2,500 metre race. Our horses run over the journey a couple of times where everyone was always inching up. We'd already been there. And then luckily for us that Danny Nicholik's horse went at a sort of great clip and opened the field right up, so much so we were struggling at 600 to keep in touch, but when he straightened up, I didn't want to go the early crow, but I was quite confident he was going to get the chocolates.
Even an early crow wouldn't have stopped him that day.
No, I was pretty happy with that. When I watched the vision, as soon as he gives him a couple of backhanders, I know you already know the result, but he would have been the one you wanted to be on.
As you said, there's still a bit of trepidation right now that you made the right decision.
I was a bit scared, to be honest. I didn't want to fail, and I took what I had. And that's, when I say regret, that's why I should have had a lot more courage and gone, no, we'll take them on. So, and running second in the Melbourne Cup would have been a highlight anyway, but I never did. And the next year after that turned into something out of like home and away.
It was a bit of a drama. He comes back the next preparation, and he does look like he's on the ideal Melbourne Cup path. He runs in the Caulfield Cup where he's a fancied runner. He runs okay. He's not disgraced, but he's probably not the brilliant galloper we'd seen 12 months earlier.
Yeah, well, he galloped down the beach at 13th Beach there, and he blew up after the gallop, and I was a bit worried, and I'm quite transparent, so I did tell the owners he's galloped better before, and I thought he was a bit fitter than that. I was a bit baffled. He was still a bit soft. So he went into the Caulfield Cup, maybe second favourite, because he'd been favourite for the Melbourne Cup for about 11 months. And he was disappointing. He didn't fire like he would. He was in the right spot, but he was just laboured to the line. And when he came in, he was still blowing a little bit more, but with a little bit of a whistle. So I thought, well, sometimes they go make a whistle when they're not fit enough and they just displace their pellet and it sort of blocks the airways. But I thought that was it. And I told the owners that. And I went home and, unbeknownst to me, the owners got approached by Freedman's. Took him out for dinner and they bought half the horse on that night. I was never getting him back, whatever was the case. So they rang up and said, we're going to give the horse to Freedman's. We're selling half and he'll be leaving the next couple of days. So he had to go get a vet certificate to pass the sale. And I went home to Perth and I got a phone call and they said he failed the vet and the horse had never had any issues. I said, he's sound as a bell. He's worked in heavy sand. He's never been shown any hard tracks. And they said, no, he's a grade 3 out of 5 roarer, which surprised me. But the that whistle I was hearing was not fitness. It was on the way out. So the the deal fell through, so I had to go and get him and bring him back. They asked me to keep him, bring him back to Perth. So he got back in Perth maybe 7 days later, and by the time 7 days, we took him down to our vet, and he was 5. So that's how much it can sort of deteriorate in such a short time. One day you got him, the next day, bang.
Your head must have been spinning. What was it like when you got the phone call to say they'd sold him? And then what was it like getting the phone call to say that he'd failed the vet's test?
In between that time in Perth, I had, I think it was 14 positive swabs. And he was one of them in Perth. And they'd learnt that it was contaminated feed through the feed bags, which they give pigs anyway. They called me and they said, oh, well, you've got 13 positive swabs, rah, rah, rah. And I said, oh, it's going to get worse. And they said, why? I said, well, I took the bags to Melbourne. So they, Des Gleeson was head steward. He went and got the bags. They were contaminated. And they pushed the swab through twice before they sent the check. But he was out of, I think, 17 or 18 horse swap positive over the time. He was the only one in the Amy Vars and the Derby what was clear of the contamination.
Oh, thank goodness.
No, well, the problem with that is people say, how could that happen? And it was that when he got there, Donnie Campbell said he wasn't drinking too much, so he gave him a drench to make him drink. So all the vets think that maybe there was only a little bit in there and that flushed through. That's the only thing that could save him, because the pellets he was eating was contaminated as well. So we dodged that bullet as well, and then we had to come up with all the year later where they were going to take him off me, and so it was always controversy wherever he sort of went, that horse.
What was the relationship like with the Harveys after all that?
No good. No, it didn't go good. It was a shame because they sort of blamed me for the horse failing, but as we know, it's one of them injuries what happened to horses all the time. So we got on well for a little while because we didn't speak for a couple of years. But, Paul finished up, come back and rode some more winners for me, but it's like going back to your ex-wife. I don't know, I haven't got that one, but it's wouldn't have thought going back to an old girlfriend would be ideal, and it never was.
The relationship was always fractured then after that. Was it disappointing in your eyes the way it played out? I mean, did you feel like you'd been betrayed?
Oh, yeah. I at the time, it sort of really worried me because, he was the main act I had, and I was just starting to get a name in overseas. I was more known in Victoria than I was in my own state. And at the time, I was always, 5 years later, I was always tired, and it wasn't until later that I learnt that I had depression. And I could sort of, the blokes that the doctor was talking about triggers, and I could go back to exact day. So it's strange how things happen, and it took 5 or 6 years of me walking around thinking I was tired all the time. And not that I wanted to put my head in the oven, but there was some dark days, and so that sort of triggered that into, I think I was on medication there for about 12 months, and then I got off that, and I've been good ever since, touch wood.
Do you look back on that period now fondly because he was the best horse you ever trained and you loved him, or the way that it ended soured the whole story for you?
Oh, no. Horses are my first love, and I've still got pictures of. I don't have pictures of horses winning. I just have a picture of my favourite photo of my horses, and he's one of them. I think I have 3, and he's one of them. And I've shut out all the rest. That things happen, and you move on. But as I said, the depression thing sort of got me by surprise, and having to deal with that. And when you see people now talk about it, I was quite lucky that I didn't get deeper and deeper into it.
Because you got onto it early?
I was 5 years, I didn't know.
Okay, so not that early then.
No, no. And it was like my wife saying, who's a nurse, she kept saying that I had depression. I said, how could I have depression? But when I went to the doctor, he asked me, I think about 10 questions, and it's the only time I ever got 10 out of 10 right. And he said, yeah, take this script down to the chemist and away you go.
And go from there. So apart from feeling tired and at times a bit flat and a bit depressed, during that 5-year period, how hard was it?
Oh, it's quite hard because even though I was winning a race, I'd go home and it didn't mean anything to me. It didn't. I thought it'd make me feel better. It didn't do it. I tried different things, didn't do it for me. It's, the first 3 weeks, nothing happened when I took the medication. I thought this isn't doing me any good. I went back to the doctor and he upped the ante and gave me 50 milligrams. And one day, about 5 weeks later, one day I was putting my shoes on and I started patting a cat. I know it sounds bizarre, but and my kids were very small. I started patting the cat. Then I started playing football with the kids. So I knew that I'd turned the corner.
You got your spark back.
Yeah.
And it was just a little moment like that triggered with you, that you knew that the real Lindsay was back.
Yeah. So then you reinvent yourself a bit, and which I did, and changed something again, and I got my spark back and started being. I'm quite creative on horses or fitness, and horses have taught me a lot, and I've taken notice of other sports what they do, but being able to at the time to ride the horses, you could sort of know when to pull back and when to keep going. Them days we were the first with the e-trackers, the heart rate monitors and all that, and they're everywhere now. Where we've changed it a little bit, but I just got my spark back, and touch wood that I've always got a packet of pills in the drawer, but I haven't had to go back there. So
it's always good to know you've got the safety net just in case you need it. Now, you just mentioned fitness, which is a lovely segue to my next question. Talk to me about the time you had a very important decision to make. Hungry Jacks or a gym membership?
Yeah. Well, I was just I met Rebecca Seymour with Jason Oliver. He had one of his 3 girlfriends on tow, and they asked me to come and be his wingman, and I said, I don't know about this. I said, they're a bit young for me. He said, you don't have to do nothing, just come along. And so I come along, and I met Rebecca, and she was and still is beautiful, and she's 13 years younger than me. So at the time I would have been 37, she would have been 24. So it was a hard mask, and I look like I do now, a bit chubby, and so I had a bit of weight to do. But yeah, I didn't think I was much of a hope. But I was driving down the road, and it said Hungry Jack. I was heading to Hungry Jack's, and it said on the turn right, $99 get fit. So I turned right and went in. I lifted my shirt up, and the bloke said it's going to cost you a lot more than $99 the way you look. So it started from there. Sean O'Day, his name was, and I think we used to run around a block. I think it might have been 1,000 metres around. I started off. It used to take me about 6 minutes to get around there. By the time he'd finished with me, it took me 2. My skin went tight. I had muscles. At the time, when I got married at 40, some people said I looked 22 on that. So it just showed that how healthy you can get. And she was and still is the one.
And that wedding was at OLA Church in Cheltenham?
Oh, you've done your homework, yeah.
And what if I said to you there was a major impact that occurred during the ceremony?
Yes, well, the Father Frank was a punter, and he heard me and the boys talk, and he goes, "Oh, have you got one in today?" And I said, "Yeah, it's major impact." He said, "Well, could someone have 50 on for me?" So one of the boys got the 50, and he was marrying Beck and I, and halfway through it, someone went, "Yes!" And he went, "Did that horse win?" He stopped and said, "Did that horse win?" The bloke like that. So he was quite happy. He said, "So this will be, he threw major impact into the service, saying that Rebecca would be a major impact in my life, which she has done.
It's quite incredible, though, that during your wedding service that you had a winner as well, and it was just embraced and part of the ceremony.
Yeah, no, it's they were the times when you have them runs where everything sort of goes. You can stay in bed and everything seems to happen. And with horse racing, people say everything comes in threes. In horse racing, bad stuff comes in tsunamis. It just keeps going. You get to about 16, you stop. Just keeps coming, and it's you ride the high. It surfs up. You ride, and when you're off, you're off. So you just got to be able to sort of be resilient and keep going. And I do like reinventing myself. I do like challenging because I'm 65 now, and I always know that I haven't come across the perfect way to train horses. See, now I train a little bit different, so because I'm on top of the ground, like on the track and just down the beach. So I'm going to spread my wings back to 13th Beach where we started from, coming over from Perth. I'm going to go back there a bit and get back to the dunes a bit, and because I did go to Warrnambool for the dunes, and they've never opened up in my time there. They got squashed, but with all the rules and whatnot and all the people down there, so they'll never coming back. So I had a lot of luck while I was there, but it's not. The world is that. The tracks on grass mornings, like you only get percentages of how you. If I've got 40 horses, I'm allowed to have 10% to gallop. So I'm allowed to gallop 4 horses. So some are going to miss out, and you've got to come up with different ways. Treadmills, they have. I've got a treadmill, but it's sort of not a. I'm learning how to handle the treadmill, but because it doesn't obviously give you the feel. But Mick Kent's good at it. I watch I admire him as a trainer. He's good at it. So I'll get better that way. But I still would like to get back to being able to ride them on the beach myself, and not worry about that I couldn't gallop this horse on the certain day.
So are you preparing to exit Warrnambool?
Not wholeheartedly, but like Shane Jackson's been good to me, and he'll stay down there, and I'll come down there a couple of times a week, and it'll just give us a little bit more different avenues how to train them, because the Mars and the Hazes of the world, I've always have a saying that they're like Coles and Woolworths, and we're like little delis. So we got to survive, and we've got to be able to take our horses to the races, fit, and hopefully fitter than them, because generally they got better horses. But if we got one as good, we've got to make sure that we're fitter than them so that we can beat them.
Well, you've done an amazing job with the horses. You've done an amazing job on this podcast. Thank you, Lindsey Smith.
Giddy up.